Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Yolanda Melody. Today I'm going to be telling the full story on why I actually dropped out of school and how I managed to get a free Mac computer funded by the school in order for me to do home education. For those of you guys that watch my channel, I'm sure you've heard me mention many times that I dropped out of school because I was bullied so badly. However, this wasn't the only reason why I dropped out. There was actually a multitude of issues that occurred that I have never spoke about on YouTube before. And the reason why I'm doing this video, I really want you guys to know, it's not because I want to be a martyr and just moan about how terrible things were at school. There is a very good reason why I'm doing this video. And that is because I know there's so many parents at the moment that are seeing the immense amount of corruption that's going on in the education system. I know there's a lot of parents that want to take their kids out of school, but maybe they don't know the first thing about home education or how to go about it. There are some parents that I actually know in person that ended up going to court because their child was refusing to go into school. And I also know that there's a lot of kids right now that are being failed by the education system and they have no idea what to do about it. Well, luckily, I would probably say I have experienced so many different issues when it comes to the education system, and I strongly believe that if you watch this video, you'll find something in there where you can relate completely. For me, I have absolutely no regrets about dropping out of school at 14. If anything, I wish I'd have done it sooner. Home education saved me and gave me so many skills that I now utilise in my day-to-day life. It gave me the foundation that I needed when it comes to self-discipline. It helped me to explore my creativity and to actually hone in on my gifts. And I just want everyone to know that there is not a one-size-fits-all. Believe it or not, you have options. Unfortunately, the education system doesn't want you to know that. But I am living, breathing proof that you can go against the grain and you can win. So without further ado, we have a lot to uncover in this video, and the first section of this video I'm going to be discussing my actual reasons why the education system didn't work for me, why it was so bad, so that you can get an idea of just how desperate me and my parents were to find me another option. Okay, so from the get-go, from the moment that I started school, it was an issue. I really struggled to fit in. I was a really happy child until I went to school, and from the moment that I walked in, I started to develop issues with anxiety. At lunchtime, when everybody else was eating in the dinner hall, I wasn't able to eat because I was that anxious. So my mom had to pick me up every single lunchtime just to make sure that I had some food. When I was little, I always used to pretend to be cartoon characters and stuff, and I used to create like my own little acting scenes. I imagined that my life was a movie. I was really creative as well, and I don't know why I did this. I think looking back it was probably a psychological defense mechanism, but apparently whenever the teachers used to ask me a question, I used to respond and say, I don't know, I'm a dog, or I'm Mickey Mouse. I would pretend to be characters and I would pretend to be anything that wasn't me. Now, to be quite honest, I don't think that this is the most worrying thing, but the teachers really didn't like that. Bearing in mind, we're talking about reception year 1 age. They called my parents into the school and they said that I'm not in touch with reality and that I'm always pretending to be characters. They said all the other children know what's going on in the world. They know what's going on the news. And I thought, what 6-year-old knows what's going on in the news? Like, why are you making your 6-year-old watch the news? I don't know. Another thing that I've never spoken about on my channel is that when I was younger, I wanted to be a boy. I didn't want to be referred to as she, her. I didn't want anyone to call me pretty. I fully felt when I was younger that I wanted to be a boy, and I wanted everyone to refer to me as Max, not as my actual name. Now, I know a lot of people right now, their ears are going to be perking up because this is a very controversial thing in this day and age. Back when I was in school, This was completely unheard of. And again, caused a lot of issues when it came to the teachers. Also, when other parents found out about this, they didn't want their children hanging out with me. But that deserves its own video, to be honest. Obviously, just to clarify, as I got to about the age of 11, I suddenly was content with being female, and I am obviously female. Even though I have a really deep voice. I don't know. Anyway, to put it bluntly, I was classed as very, very weird. So primary school was bad. Little did I know it was gonna get a hell of a lot worse. My issues with teachers, specifically sadistic teachers, was an issue. I had one teacher that grabbed me by my collar on my coat and pulled me that hard that it ripped my coat. The reason why I'm mentioning this is I'm obviously not going to say this about all teachers, but I do believe there is a lot of people that get into the education system and want to be a teacher simply because they are sadistic. Again, I must say, not all teachers, but some of them. It's not exactly unfeasible that an adult that's got issues within themselves decides to go into a profession where they get to rule over and power over people who are vulnerable, like children. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. Let me compose myself. I went into middle school, and just so that everyone knows, in some parts of the UK, we have a different kind of schooling system. We'll have a primary school that ends at about year 4, and then sometimes we have a middle school, which is year 5 to year 8, and then we have a high school that starts from year 9 into when you finish. So I ended up actually going to 2 middle schools, and this is where things start to go really, really downhill. So in the first middle school, I seemed to be getting along okay. I still didn't fit in, and I still didn't like going to school, but at least I had some friends. And then one day, everything got flipped upside down. There was an issue where a teacher who was the head of form in my year had called me into a room and continued to scream in my face. Bearing in mind, this is year 5. I can't recall how young I was, probably maybe 9, 10. This teacher continued to scream at me for about 15 minutes, and it really did seem like she was just trying to completely and utterly break me down until I was a shell of myself. I think the level of adrenaline that I felt during this time caused me to go into shock, but I can't describe how badly this teacher really just went crazy at me. So you might be wondering, what did I do that was that bad to cause this teacher to scream at me with such aggression? It must have been something really, really bad. Right? Well, we'd been given this task to illustrate a picture. A lot of you guys haven't seen my artwork, but when I was younger, I did a lot of kind of manga style illustrations. Illustration was the first creative pursuit that I really, really seemed to flourish in. Granted, there was so many situations where it wasn't appreciated in school, and this is one of them. The brief that we were given was express your creativity, do a pretty card, and I was looking at all of these pre-picked designs that the teacher had done, and I thought, I want to go above and beyond. I want to do something that's really artistic. So at the time, I was really, really into Final Fantasy. For those who don't know, it's a video game and it's got 3 girls. I just wanted to create something beautiful that I thought the teachers would appreciate. So I drew the girls from Final Fantasy, and I thought, wow, the teacher will be really impressed with this. Genuinely. The next day I arrived at school, I was called up to the desk, and my teacher was absolutely furious. Beyond belief. I was so shocked at what I was hearing that it caused me to kind of freeze up, and I didn't really know how to respond to it. But the teacher went on to say that the drawing that I'd done was beyond offensive, and she seemed to believe that I had deliberately put the girls in skimpy clothing to make it offensive. The girls also had weapons. If you check on Final Fantasy, It's a game, we're fighting, so they have weapons. That was also taken really, really badly. And as if it wasn't enough for my teacher to tell me all of this, I wasn't even given a chance to explain myself before she sent me over to the head of year, and then that situation happened, with her screaming in my face and being an absolute psychopath. So for the rest of the day at school, I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I didn't talk to anyone. I was incredibly emotionally disturbed from what happened that morning. My dad picked me up at the end of school and he could clearly see that there was something really, really wrong. So I told him what had happened and he went straight up to the school. He was absolutely furious, and the head teacher actually turned to my dad and said, "Find your daughter another school then." Now, that's actually illegal. A head teacher, or any teacher, is not allowed to tell you to find another school. We didn't even realise how wrong it was for the head teacher to say this, but later found out that they had broken the law. So I essentially dropped out of that middle school, and I was out of school for probably about 6 months, and then I was put into a different middle school. Long story short on that one, this was the middle school where the bullying was absolutely rife. I started to develop acne. I was bullied every single day about my face, and it was something that I couldn't change. I tried to fight back and be confident, not physically fight, but I tried to stand up for myself, and it had got to the stage where I was backed into a corner. There was loads of girls saying that they were going to beat me up, and the school wasn't doing anything about it. So for my own safety, I refused to go back because I could see that that situation was escalating. And the real funny thing is, well, actually it's not funny at all, but the strange thing with schools is that if your child is being bullied, the school will see them as the problem. They look at it like, well, we've got a bunch of bullies here, but they're all bullying this one person. So the easier thing to do is to take this one out of the equation. Solved. Don't get rid of the bullies, get rid of the victim. A reoccurring theme that happened all the way through school were teachers telling me to just ignore it. But you can't. You can't just ignore it. It disrupts your entire life. As if going to school, being institutionalised, and all of that wasn't bad enough. When you put bullying into the equation, do you really think anyone is going to be learning anything? The social politics that happen in school, when you're in the thick of it, it is all that you can think about all day long. And for that reason, for me, I really, really cannot remember learning anything from the age of about 11 onwards. Seriously. And finally, we get to high school. This was the final straw. You remember how I was saying about the UK having a middle school system? Well, as we know, I went to 2 different middle schools. The problem with that is that all of the kids from both of those middle schools were about to be joined into the same high school. So basically, both of the schools that I dropped out of, I already knew everyone from both of those schools. I'd left those schools for a reason, and now all of the same people from both sides were going to be in the same place. It was a recipe for disaster. Needless to say, from day one I could tell that it just wasn't gonna work. I really don't want to bang on about how bad the bullying got because, again, I say I don't want to be a martyr about this. Like, I'm good now. I'm fine. But I just really want to paint the picture of how the only option for me at this point was homeschooling. There was no option to do a phased return or anything like that. I couldn't even go into the building without feeling like I wanted to be sick with anxiety. Teamed with that, I was very rebellious, not gonna lie. And for the small portion of time that I attempted to go to the high school, I had developed issues with not just all of the girls in my year, but their older siblings, the teachers. I had become so pushed at this point that in order to preserve myself, I had to develop a certain level of arrogance to protect myself, and I'm not going to apologise for saying that because I'm not being funny, but I was a very, very nice child. I had all the love to give to the world, but after all of these experiences, I hated the world. This is the phase where I became a goth. So what did I do in the interim between entering high school, realising that it's not going to work, but not yet being on homeschooling? How did I work around that? Well, I found a little trick where I could walk into school, sign in at the register at the main office. This is a system that they worked out for people who are like 10 minutes late, so I'd always deliberately be late, sign in at the late register, and then as soon as I'd done that, I would walk out the gate. I'd walk out the gate, I'd catch the bus, and go and hang out with my goth friends in the town. That's what I did. And that seemed to work out for me until they started to clock on that I wasn't signing in at lunchtime. So the teachers seemed to believe that every single day, halfway through the day, I seemed to just escape. And then what they would do is they'd ring my dad and they'd say, Yolanda's not in school today. And obviously my dad knew because I texted my dad to say I've gone to town. It was totally fine because my dad had troubles with school as well. My parents were fully supportive of me, not of the school system. They understood what I was going through. The school did not. More to the point, because of the immense levels of stress happening with the school, I had already started to self-injure. I'm not sure what words I'm allowed to say on YouTube, but you kind of get the gist. But it had got that bad that my mental health was in a terrible place, and I honestly felt like I had no escape. However, during the time that I was a goth and I was meeting all of these like-minded people, there were two girls that I knew that had so many bad problems at school, and they told me about this thing called notschool.net. Notschool.net was a homeschooling system developed by some amazing people. It was completely unheard of in the area that I was in, but when my friends at the time were telling me about this, it seemed too good to be true. They said that because of their troubles, their parents battled with the education system, and eventually they were put onto Not School, which is an online schooling system, and they were even given a free Mac computer, brand new, so that they could do their homeschooling, and apparently the school had to fund it. I think I put it off for maybe about a month or two simply because it just sounded too good to be true. I thought, how? And then eventually I had to bite the bullet. My attendance at school, I think, had gone down to about 10%, maybe less. It had got down to shocking levels, evidently because I couldn't do one full day, let alone a week. And the school was starting to threaten my parents with court. So they'd called us into a meeting and they'd left me out the room, and they wanted to speak to my parents just on their own without me. And after about 20 to 30 minutes, I was finally called in, and it felt as if the school had backed my parents into a corner. I was given absolutely no option by the time that I'd walked into the room. No option to speak about why I wasn't attending school. I wasn't given any option to negotiate. The teachers had decided what their solution was going to be, and it seemed like that was final. So because my attendance was so dire, their solution was that I was to only attend 3 days a week, when I wasn't even attending for an hour a week. To make it worse, they said that this would be for a limited time, and eventually I would be eased back into a full-time schedule, going 5 days a week, attending all the time. And like I say, I don't think that my parents wanted this or thought that this was feasible. I think they went along with it because the school was threatening to take them to court. So they were hoping that I would compromise and say, yeah, I'll go in 3 days a week, even though I can't even walk into this building and it's destroying my mental health and making me want to end my life. Are you even allowed to say that on YouTube? I think people use the term unlife or something, I don't know. So it was at this point that I mentioned to the teachers and the head of year in this meeting about not school. And at first they tried to sweep it under the carpet as if it wasn't a feasible option. I mentioned that 2 other girls that I knew were on this scheme and they claimed to have no understanding of it whatsoever, therefore it's not applicable. Well, needless to say, that 3-day-a-week schedule that they'd tried to work me into didn't work. After that meeting, I continued to not go to school, and eventually I was put onto not school. I was the first ever child to be put on this in my area. Turns out the school didn't want my parents to know about this scheme because the problem is that if the school system fails you that badly, they are the ones that have to fund the homeschooling scheme. And what that scheme entailed was something absolutely phenomenal. I had gone from being suicidal, having no drive, no ambition, no room to think of anything positive. It really did seem like there was nothing that I was gonna do with my life. I'd went from that to becoming so creative, self-disciplined. My outlook on the world had changed. I was happy. I was peaceful. When I was finally put onto not school, we had 2 people visit the house to bring the free Mac computer that I was going to work on. These people were absolutely wonderful. Obviously, their whole organisation was built for kids like me. The education system had just failed. What was great about this was that I was given the chance to do the work that I wanted to do. And because of that, my work and my creative skills flourished. Within about a month of being on not school, my mental health had improved so much. I was writing poetry, I started doing my illustrations again, and they were actually appreciated. I tell you what, even in high school, there was one incident where I kept drawing illustrations, and the teacher actually grabbed the pictures that I was illustrating, scrunched them up and threw them in the bin. Over and over again. Who are these people? I started showing interest in photography, so they gave me a free camera funded by the school. They were willing to give me whatever tools I needed to create whatever I wanted, and that to me was amazing. And it's so frustrating that there are people who would have really benefited from this system who had no idea about it. The school won't tell you about it. Around the time that I was homeschooled, this was when MySpace was quite big, and that's also when I started realising that I wanted to have a future in social media. And here I am years later, and I've got a YouTube channel. It was during that time that I realised what I really wanted to do in life, and that is anything to do with entertainment and creativity. And it was only when I was out of that toxic environment that I was actually able to realise that. I was actually able to realise that it wasn't me that was the problem. You know, technically, school is supposed to be a place where people hone in on a child's gifts. They're supposed to notice and understand what that child might be skilled in and push them in the right direction. But that didn't happen with me at all. In fact, quite the opposite happened. Unfortunately, notschool.net is no longer an active scheme anymore. I really do count my blessings that I was able to utilise this scheme whilst they were active. However, in this day and age with the resources that we have and Google, I really do encourage anyone who's in this situation, whether you're a parent or a child, I encourage you to research what your options are and don't stop at the first hurdle. This scheme was really classed as an absolute last resort for people who really just cannot go to school. But I really do believe that there are so many other options now, and you just need to educate yourself on what the laws are, what your rights are, how you're legally protected in certain situations. And yeah, this has been a very long video to film. I've crammed a lot of stories in this. I hope that this is the last time that I'm going to mention about dropping out of school, but who knows. It kind of shaped me to be the person that I am today, so I do mention it a lot. and I don't regret it. It was the best thing that I ever did. So I hope that you found this video inspiring, interesting. Please feel free to comment down below your experiences with school and the education system. If you want to diss them, this is the place, because I 100% do not support the education system. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop me a like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. Love you, bye.